Well, Todd, you're of course the founder of the Purism Laptop and open source hardware and software line, and we already talked on the WCN. So how are you doing? How do you like the conference?
Yeah, it's a great conference so far. Actually, was here all day yesterday and found it fantastic. What's cool is the credibility of all the speakers and having people who are from the community doing a lot of the talking. I think is really great, and so that's something that I've enjoyed.
So we've been talking about the Purism Laptop and how it's open source hardware and hardware we can trust, and especially some of the features, like it has an on-off switch for the camera that's not just a software switch or trust the Macintosh, but an actual, like, some kind of physical hardware thing where the electrons cannot jump over the gap, and like once you turn it off, it's really off. What can you tell us about even just the basics of Purism?
Well, I think you just pretty much nailed the hardware kill switch,
Nice.
which is actually severing the electrical circuit for components. So on the Librem 5 phone that's coming out in April is going to be a physical switch that severs the baseband, so you can actually just simply toggle off the ISP from your device. And so by having that proper isolation between the CPU and the cellular provider, it means that then you can have proper security story. And then we also have it for the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and then camera microphone combination. And so by being able to physically sever the circuit, then it just sort of gives you that extra confirmation that nothing can happen. Now, of course, we also run software that is all free software, so there's no binaries at all in the software that can be loaded by remote, or any software update can never load anything that isn't free software. And then leveraging things that are like reproducible builds, which will allow for us to release all of our reproducible build hashes, and then have someone, because we're a Free Software Foundation endorsed on our distribution PureOS, then that could be reproducibly built by Free Software Foundation, or you as an individual, or any third party. And so then reproducible builds gets us to where you can actually confirm that the software hasn't been maliciously tampered on the version you have. So we have the complete stack, from releasing the schematics on the phone side to confirming that hardware is truly what it's supposed to be, and then having a complete freed software stack. That means then we have a solid foundation for anything else to build on.
And that really is a great endorsement from the Free Software Foundation. Richard Stallman, pretty much the inventor of Linux and of open source, a lot of the ideas behind it, is a famous hardliner. He will not use systems that are not open source. He won't use hardware or software that's not open source. To see him and the foundation support your project is really an impressive honor.
And I have to say, just a little tidbit, that we usually do these streams, of course, on YouTube, and thus we use Google Hangouts, right? And so when I wanted to have Todd on the show, I was like, are we just going to use Google Hangouts? And he's like, well, we could, but I don't have a Google account. And I mean, it would be a hassle to create a sock puppet account just for this one-off thing. So why not use Jitsi, a open source streaming platform? And so Todd is clearly just as hardline, and he's like, no, I'm not going to use these types of software. I'm just going to use Libre software. How much of a hardliner are you in that aspect?
Oh, I'm a hardliner. Now, if you're talking about the ultimate hardliner of Richard Stallman, there are areas that I think I would be willing to lose a battle to sort of win the overall war.
Sure.
But besides those minor areas, the fact is Richard Stallman has had 35 years of being right.
Right. Absolutely.
So you have to respect that.
Definitely.
And so I use and promote products that are ethical, because it actually creates an ethical society. And so I take a hardline approach to that. As a matter of fact, I think I was just asked what my Twitter handle was, and I said, I don't have one of those. I don't want one of those. But however, our company does, and the reason is because we have to bridge the gap from the utopia that I live in and the dystopia that society lives in, and we need to bring people over. So we have to build those bridges, and so having those bridges means having a Twitter account that can tell people about it, and having a Facebook account that can tell people about why they need to not use it any longer. But I personally do not have them, nor have I ever. So I'm that hardline approach. I host my own email servers. I build everything from scratch. And so what I realized was that, for me personally, I'm willing to inconvenience myself to retain control. And then having 2 daughters, I realized, wait, I need to change society for the better, because in the future, it's going to be convenience that ends up removing the digital civil rights that we have. And we've already seen this. So that's where we decided to say, we can actually solve that problem by actually making things that are convenient and retain you as an individual's control. And so we decouple the issue of having convenience that controls you, right? So, which is what all big tech does, right? So big tech is all about maximizing profit. It's a systemic issue that they have.
Sure.
And that's one of the reasons we solved the systemic issue by forming as a social purpose corporation. And what that really means is that we advance our social purpose over maximizing profit. And then that means that everybody involved, our board of directors, shareholders, me, executives, all of staff, understand that every decision we're making has to advance social purpose and social good. And having that be a systemic understanding within the organization makes it where just amazing things are happening. And so the other really important piece is that we only charge for the things people understand they have to pay for, right? So hardware is obviously one of them. And so so by charging for what people are willing to pay for, then we can use that leverage and influence change where change has never been before. And then as we grow, which we are growing very rapidly, then we can influence change in all sorts of other ways as well. So such as we're coming out with our phone next year. Next year in 2019, we're also going to be announcing a product called Liberty, which is actually going to be services. And those services are going to adhere to a very strict guidelines of ethics. So that's like, chat. So you can think of it like what we would compete with, right? It would be Twitter, Facebook, Skype,
sure.
WhatsApp, right? Facebook Messenger, all that garbage, right? So, and what we're going to do is have it be where it's decentralized, right? And use end-to-end encryption that the user controls the keys as opposed to the corporation. So there's a lot of things that are in the works, but being able to grow and advance those causes is an extremely exciting thing for our entire team.
Well, it sounds fantastic to have a philosophical core at the center of your company and have a reason for doing things other than just profit. I know Google famously had the "Don't be evil" slogan, which I always took as do everything right up until the point of evil, which gives you a lot of groundwork to work with. Like when they launched Gmail, and they said, well, it's not evil to read your email and to put ads in there. Yeah. And some people said, that's incredibly evil. But they're like, nah, it's like really close to evil, but not quite there. So.
And they actually removed that slogan.
Oh yeah, I know. It's
right?
like be good now or something. I don't really believe them when they say it.
Yeah, right, of course, we're happy to. But so that's where but at the heart of it is actually, and I just gave a talk on this subject, which is that it's for C corps, right? So corporations within the U.S.
Yes.
They have to legally maximize shareholder value.
Sure.
Which means that at all costs that are legal. Now, currently, we have no digital civil rights, so they can just tromp all over the top of them. Right? And so and it's legal to do so. So this is where we need to advance both advocacy, but also regulatory, and saying, hey, you know what, we should advance the rights that we'd like to see as society in the digital world. And then we can also solve it by, switching to use products that are ethical. But it actually isn't an issue of, do you have anything to hide? Like, that's never been really the issue. It's always been for me is a digital civil rights issue, which is to say that these huge C corps, by their definition, because there's no regulation otherwise, can exploit society for their gain. And so what we need to say, hey, you know what, there's actually different choices, and let's actually promote those choices. But let's also actually try to write the rules that we would like to see in the digital society. And then what will happen is if those regulations can actually be indoctrinated, then we can see the change and move in that direction. So it's taking it to the heart of, it's a digital civil rights issue as opposed to like, do you have, you want to hide your picture? It has, it's a much bigger issue than what is sort of being spread around.
And certainly when the original corporations were founded by the Dutch, they were chartered to serve the state, to open up trade routes to India, to bring back spices for the good of the people. And that we've completely lost these ideas, as you say. It's entirely about the profit motive. It's entirely about getting more and turning eyeballs into money the way that Facebook did. building the social network, adding in the ads, making it friendly for the advertisers to get all of your information, and that now we're at this point where people don't even understand the values of privacy or understand what they've given up. Adolfo Linares spoke earlier. He's a lawyer. He worked with the Panama Papers. He's here at the convention somewhere. I'd like to get him on here. But he spoke about how his kids are just sharing everything on Instagram and Facebook, and they don't even have the concept of what privacy is or why privacy is important. And this is probably why we're losing it and why it's going away, because people don't know, that we fought for this, and that we, all these different sit-ins and all these different people giving up their lives, giving up their time, their energy to get us this privacy, and that we're just going to give it away. So someone said that we've given up all of their privacy so that we can share photos, and that sharing photos is not necessary to give up all your privacy. But somehow Facebook convinced us all, and Instagram, that it was a good deal of all of your privacy and your friends get to see your vacation photos. It's just a bad trade-off.
And dick pics. And don't forget the dick pics.
So many. So.
Yeah, there's you're touching on a lot, and I appreciate the fact that you have a history and understanding sort of the corporate structure. So one of the important things to note is that corporations in the physical world have centuries of precedent that they have been following, right? So they're not going to murder somebody, right, that we know of. So what will happen in the digital world is there's no rights. So they can completely exploit and enslave individuals and their data for their gain. And so this is why it's important to actually bring awareness that to policymakers, to people, is saying this is actually a digital civil rights issue. It's not something that's just minor that you should just sort of like care about. It's a giant problem. And so how do we end up addressing that? We have to solve the systemic issues, and then actually, so Purism is looking to solve it as putting out product that's convenient, that allows you to control your own life, and then also an activist, so we can talk about these issues that I'm doing here, and then also regulatory, right? So actually bringing the awareness that, hey, these are important issues for society. And I think that what's really great is that the erosion of trust of big tech is already well on the way to collapse, right? Of big tech. And so the good news is that the awareness is there, right? People just can't wholeheartedly trust any big tech company. I don't know of actually anybody who does. There are people who still use those services because they're convenient, but the actual erosion of trust is already well underway. Well, and so what we need is we need to have convenient products that follow that to say, hey, just switch to this. So we can have a giant switch campaign as opposed to like a delete Facebook campaign, which doesn't really solve the problem. We need to switch to something that's actually ethical.
Yeah. And now just recently there was this publication that in China they had a teeny tiny little chip that they introduced.
And all we were going to go there. Yeah, that's a big story.
And of course that is a huge issue because there's pretty much almost no way that to really verify that there are no tamperings like this in the chip. So is open sourcing the hardware and the chipset one step, and is it enough? And what can we do to defend against this?
Yeah, so a few things. By releasing the schematics and then confirming the hardware after the fact, right, then you can actually verify the hardware the same way you can verify like reproducible builds within software. So that is an important step. So our phone is actually going to be the first product that Purism puts out where we can release the schematics, and because it's not copyright encumbered, so just like Intel reference designs are for laptops. And so we can actually solve that problem. So then what you get is to then you say, well, were you was an individual specifically targeted, and then they had some modification. And we even have a solution around that with the Librem key that can sign the device on the key and then ship you the key and then ship you the phone separate, and you can plug it in. A green light means it hasn't been tampered with, not a single bit. And then we can also support anti-interdiction, which means that we can ship the package in something that's uniquely signed. And so then we can completely remove all of those pieces. The other piece that's important on the phone side is that we don't have to manufacture it out of Dongguan, China, right? So not manufactured out of anywhere within China even. And so that as an option allows us to then say, would it be worthwhile to manufacture it? Because I want to import one important point. Is that manufacturing in China, when you're talking about component parts, PCBs, etc., it's actually machine versus machine. So any country that has the same machine that we would run the fab line on, it's the same price, right? So it's the extra manual labor processes that are the reason why so much is moved to China. And so we have the choice, because ours is a complete fab run to the end, that we can fabricate it anywhere. So we're considering fabricating it in the US or in Germany and a few other places, actually, even Switzerland. And then we can still, if we opt to, fabricate parts of it out of China if we want. So by having complete control of the supply chain, then we can look at those things differently than anybody else has ever been able to.
And I talked to Peter Todd yesterday about this exact same issue, and we like to talk about space pirates and mining at black holes, so we get out there, and his idea was maybe 3D printing the parts of the chipset, which will of course decentralize the production right to an individual level. So is that something that you're looking into, and how likely is it?
Well, it's likely, but it's also likely with a delay. So the important piece about 3D printing, or let's say if you're going to fabricate a phone yourself, right, is that the schematics don't get you there. It's actually called Gerber files, and so those are files that allow you to fabricate a device. And so we are not going to be releasing the Gerber files day one, and for a pretty simple reason, is because then other people would be able to fabricate a line and directly sell for none of the investment that we put in, right? So they can just take the Gerber files and fabricate something. So we are thinking about having like a time capsule related to the release of those documents, right? So which could be, I don't know, 3 years, 5 years, or something like that. Which means that in that period of time, then you'd be able to fabricate an older version. And so then that still gets us the leverage that we need to influence change for the better. And I think that that's a fair trade-off to get there. Because it really comes down to, if we were to just release it where someone else can just fabricate, then we face a much bigger problem, which is, we just did all this effort and we can't get a return on the investment that we've made on development, hardware, and everything else. So that's at least how we've rationalized that approach to try to figure out what model could work.
I once tried to get all of my friends to encrypt their email, and I wrote a help file, and I had step-by-step diagrams with cartoons and jokes and everything. And what happened to me is that all my friends stopped emailing me. So how can we get people to value their privacy?
That sounds like a benefit.
Well, it was actually pretty good. Email's gotten worse and worse these days. But how can we get people to actually value their privacy and to make these good choices and to move in this direction?
Well, it's all about convenience versus control. So historically, it has been, where big tech, the reason that they end up dominating is because it's convenient and they retain control. And so you have to give up your control to use these services. So what I believe is we can have convenience and control. And so as an example, because you brought up email, like we partnered with Werner Koch, who was one of the creators of GPG encryption. And what we're doing is we are bundling that. So this is, you can imagine if I can hand you a phone,
sure,
and it already has, you can just register an account and it generates everything for you. This is for the average user, right? Generates everything for you, and then you can just simply email you. And the actual, through a web directory lookup, pull in your public key and do an email encryption. So there's actually no setup, right? So the barrier to send an encrypted email is exactly the same barrier as just registering for an email account. That is where we're going. And it'll take a little bit of time to get there, but I mean, we're not talking about a decade. We're talking about maybe a year. And so then what you can do is have somebody go just register for an account that uses a web directory, and then you can immediately, they'll just be sending encrypted email. They don't even know, right? And then they'll just realize, wow, this is awesome. I'm sending encrypted email, and and it's just working. The people who are going to care, can generate their own keys or go through the extra steps that they may want to, but we need to make products that are convenient and retain control for individuals, and that comes down to respecting their digital civil rights.
I think that's right, and you remind me a lot of my friend JJ, who's very into open source. He uses only the command line. He's got about 4 terminal windows open at all time. He won't watch Netflix because it's not open source. I think they used a Microsoft plugin at some point. And what would the interface of Purism be like? Is it a command line? Is it confusing, or is it more aimed at normal users?
Yeah, it's very much normal users. Yes. Because again, back to convenience, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
No, there's no terminal. kernel, right?
Sure.
By default, you can certainly go if you
hunt
it
there,
down and
it's
operate
there,
it, but it's a very we partner with Gnome Foundation, and they have been, it's like awesome, right? It's amazing, and so it's very easy to use. And then on our phone, we've also because our phone's not Android or iOS.
Okay.
Right. Our phone is going to be GNOME.
Okay.
And so GNOME running within PureOS. Now, what that means is, and we have a bunch of GNOME designers on our team, and so we are making sure that it is very easy.
Great.
The other piece, because of this combined bundle, right? We do hardware, which is the Librem line.
Yeah.
We do PureOS and all the software applications that go in that. And then we have what we're upcoming, right before our phone ships, what we call Liberty, which is actually ethical services. And so what you can actually have is when you purchase a phone, let's say you purchase a phone for one of your family members.
Sure.
Or one of your friends who doesn't email you anymore. Right?
Maybe I can get them back.
Yes, exactly. Then you can hand them a phone, and they can register with an email account, and then all of the applications that are ethical light up, and they can just start using it with applications that are very much mobile friendly, right? So on-screen keyboard, same icon, similar, usability of those things. The area that I think is important to note, though, is applications, right? So in the, you may have 10 apps that you use,
sure,
and someone else may have a different 10 apps that they use, but the app store is going to be tens of thousands of applications. And ours, because we are so rooted in ethics, that we're only going to allow free software-based applications in our app store.
Fantastic.
So what that means is that when you're downloading something from there, it's still protecting you.
Right.
But that also means that if you're wanting to use a ride-sharing application, because what the ride-sharing application is not going to be free software, it's not going to respect your rights, it's going to mine all of your data, then you can't. Now, until they realize that there's enough user base and we have gained leverage, and maybe they would write an ethical one. So, and so then but of course there's going to be a web browser, right? So you can do a lot with a browser. So we're planning to ship with a minimum of 5 applications that are the core of communication, right? So you can make a phone call, you can send text messages.
Great.
You can check your email, you can browse the web, and you can have encrypted communication.
Cool.
And so with that combination, you can do an awful lot with the phone, and we can just hand it to people saying, hey, this is your phone that you can use for that respects your rights. And then as more and more applications come out, right, which we're shipping 300 developer kits this month, and that means that there'll be active development. So what you can see is that the momentum is there. And when you have momentum, then that you can actually influence change. And so it's not something that day one, 5 apps, and then 6 months later it'll be 5 apps. It's going to be many, many, many more.
And so will these apps only be available for Purism hardware, or is this something that everyone can use regardless of their hardware?
So all of the software we use, we always push upstream. So in the case of PureOS, we push that upstream to Debian. If it's GNOME, then we push that upstream to GNOME. If it's KDE, then we push upstream to KDE. And so having those partnerships allows us to make sure that we're moving this forward in an ethical way across devices. Now granted, our phone will be the first phone to run it, but that doesn't mean that somebody couldn't port it and then maybe taint the kernel to run on any Android device. Now it doesn't get you the same level of protection and security, but it's at least a means of getting more users, right, to then use the system or install applications that are ethical. And so and then it also makes it where an individual has the choice, right, of what they'd like to do. And I think those are all important things to advance.
Now, you mentioned earlier that we don't have like an Internet Bill of Rights or an International Privacy Bill of Rights, and I've noticed this a lot in the media recently. We talk a lot about certain countries perhaps hacking the American election, and we just don't have the same kind of rules. If you send a soldier over a line, clearly that's an act of war, but if you send a cyber soldier over a line, we don't know how to punish you, and if you steal someone's data, we don't know how to punish you. What can we do to kind of further this understanding and to move everyone towards a privacy bill of rights and to have the same kind of laws we have in the meat space in the cyberspace?
Yeah, so there's a couple of points. There's actually a great book called Binary Bullets that's actually sort of touching on this sort of cyber warfare aspect of things, because you brought that specific example up. And then there is what we're advancing is an area that we call purist standard, which is basically in the online world what should be the Bill of Rights. And there was actually recently, Tim Berners-Lee also came out with a list of 10. We think we can boil it down to 5, which we did. So we're advancing that same cause. And so you think about it with Purism, we solve it on the market side, which means giving a choice to people.
Exactly, where there previously was none.
Yes.
I mean, Apple, Macintosh, Android, Linux, and these are great things, and they help me edit videos, they help me do things, but I know that I don't have any privacy there.
That's right. So in the solving it on the market side, and then also being an activist allows us to basically bring awareness to these issues.
Yeah.
But then that last bit, which we're going to be doing more of, is the policy, right? So actually influencing with policymakers. And so then at least our voice can be heard, which means then we could potentially be writing rules that are actually benefiting society as opposed to benefiting big tech.
And so, of course, you said that you're activists upon others, and that you do also want to manifest political change. So where's your focus here? How much do you focus on building stuff and agorism, right, counter economics, and how much do you focus on politics?
That's a great question. I think it comes and goes. So there's times where it can be more than full-time focused on hardware manufacturing, or trying to pool together a team to focus on certain applications we're looking to advance. But then other times, which is really around the schedule within the political landscape, meaning a meeting scheduled, and it's like, okay, well then let's set aside time to prepare and then attend that meeting and try to advance that cause. So I think it's probably I'm going to say in 2019, it might be 15% of my time on political activism, and then another maybe 20% of my time on actual just activism and building awareness, such as coming to this conference. And then the rest of the time is making sure that we're on the path to this larger vision within the organization. And it's great. Because we have a team that's so dedicated to the cause, that it makes it very, very easy to manage, because I can be hands-off, right? It's just that everybody's eager to actually solve these issues. And that makes it where I have a little more freedom to be able to do the things that I think are important in the picture.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us. And where can people learn out more about the Purism Laptop?
Yeah, pretty simple. Our URL is puri.sm.
And when is the new phone coming out? Any new announcements you want to make right here while we have everyone's attention?
April is when the phone's coming out.
Great.
And the only new announcement, it would be that we're planning to release what we call Liberty, which is going to be the decentralized ethical services. And these are built off of existing technologies. We're just rolling them all up into a single product. So it's going to be great, and 2019 is already preparing itself to be a jamming year for us. So it's going to be. I'm very excited.
All right, absolutely. And guys, if we talk about Purism a lot, and I hope you looked into it. And if you are still, if you're after this interview still on doubt that Purism is not amazing, well then I do not know what we can do for you. So get your hands on this amazing super slick laptop. I for sure cannot wait until I get my hands on some to do further testing and provide you all these videos here and to see if this is actually really a good thing or just vaporware. Not yet sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Really
it's been an honor, and keep up the good fight.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's it.